So this is why we need to look at the Sumerian epic. Okay, these are supposedly the myths where everything originated from, all these biblical stories or accounts of the flood, of paradise, and the fall of man, etc. So this book here is from the University of Pennsylvania, USA, the University Museum, Publications of the Babylonian Section, Sumerian Epic of Paradise, the Flood, and the Fall of Man by Stephen Langdon, 1915. Oops, getting the wrong way. Here's the contents page. Introduction, synopsis, etc., etc. Introduction, the Sumerian Epic in Paradise, the Flood, and the Fall of Man. And they go blah, blah, blah. We want to get to the meat and potatoes of it. And this one seems to be very, very different. Okay, I'm going to make us disappear for a while. I'm going to go back. The Sumerian Epic in Paradise. The Sumerian Epic of Paradise. The Flood and the Fall of Man. Introduction. In the autumn of 1912, the author copied, among about 50 others, a triangular fragment of a tablet in the Nippur collection in the museum. This fragment, which had been numbered 4561, can be distinguished clearly in the right upper corner of the obverse and right lower corner of the reverse of the restored tablet shown in plates 5 and 6, which show the tablet in its natural size. The contents of this fragment were first mentioned by his colleague, Professor Stacey. That's the one that says all creation was finished by God in 4000 BC. At the June, we're pretty sure it's the same guy, at the June meeting of the Society of Biblical Archaeology in London, at which their lamented friend Professor R.F. Harper was present and contributed memorable remarks. Footnote down the bottom here. The author published an account of this fragment in the June number of PSBA, whatever that was, 1913. And epitome soon afterwards appeared in the London Times. Later, the museum authorities found other portions of this remarkable text, which obviously contains a Sumerian version of the flood and the fall of man, antedating by at least 1,000 years the version in Hebrew. So, if you're looking at the scriptures, is it Genesis 10 onwards, where man becomes his own worst enemy, he turns his back on God. Those who are calling upon the name of the Lord, this new lineage is supposed to be a holy line that Christ sort of came through. If it hadn't been separated or whatever, or they turned their back on God, left their rightful place, and then intermarried, or they merged with, intermarried, the daughters of men, unrighteous, ungodly men, who are doing their own thing, and then had children to them who came out as strange creatures, real tall giants, massive, fierce, creepy, funny looking, whatever, according to the scriptures, the original ancient Ktav Ashurit, right? And they become powerful because they were like giants in the land, and very fierce, and became well known. Probably where the legend of the giants came from, from the Greeks, etc., etc. Okay, so where were we? Yeah, and then the according to the scriptures, men eventually, prior to that probably, men ended up meeting in this desert area in the east, Shinar or Sumer, and then one of their great leaders, Nimrod, built this city, Babylon, and then they built this Tower of Babel, and they all spoke this one language, and then apparently God come down to see them, to see what they're up to, and he gave them multiple languages and confused them because they spoke this one language and understood each other. They were all united, all this sort of stuff, and he scattered them across that geographical location, right? And they migrate off, eventually become these different peoples, tribes, etc. Okay, so Later, the museum authorities found other portions of this remarkable text, which obviously contains a Sumerian version of the flood and fall of man, antedating by at least 1,000 years the version in Hebrew. Okay, then you have the cuneiform text that Victor N. Alexander, the Aramaic-speaking translator, where we bring this translation project into English, right? He translated it, which we bring to you in video format. Okay, he translated from those 3,000-year-older Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets, because it says that in his translation project. Okay, that's what he did. Okay, so going back to that Sumerian epic. The photograph will show how well the museum authorities have succeeded. To this guy's original fragment, this writer, they have added one large fragment and one small one, which practically restores this large 6-column tablet. This addition had been made from his copy of the original fragment and photographs of the later drawings. The composition is of an epical nature and probably represents more nearly than any production yet discovered the national epic of the religious and cultured Sumerian people. There's sort of a conflict we're having that, like, some people are saying they were Semitic and some people are saying they weren't. So if all these men met up in the east and they built this Babylon, Nimrod built this Babylon, and then the Tower of Babel, then yeah, probably they were. You know? If there was different peoples there and they're all united, well, they would have merged, intermarried, had children from them. So they would have been half-breeds, etc., etc., right? Okay? So they would have been Semitics or Semites. Sumerian culture was synonymous with world culture, and her great religious traditions became universal traditions adopted by the Semitic peoples who subsequently came upon the scene of history. The colophon describes the composition as a hymn of praise. Yeah, so thinking about that, men coming to Shinar or Sumer, uniting and building this tower, well, way before that, these are obviously the descendants of Adam through to Noah, Shem, Japheth, Ham, etc. So yeah, they invaded these different geographical locations, conquered these people, took their possessions, etc., who were actually related to them. They're cousins, okay? Their descendants, etc., etc. And then they probably took a lot of stuff off these Aboriginals, right? These indigenous peoples, okay? But they're basically fighting their own kind, their own kin, their relations, you know? Pillaging, etc., etc., and having more descendants that, you know, half-breeds, Semites. Synopsis. The theme which inspired this epic is the fall of man, and it will be generally admitted that this theme suggests the most profound ideas and inspires the deepest emotions of man. Enki, okay, this is all mythical in a pantheon of gods, little g's, okay, you got little g, Enki, the water god, right there, look, little g, and his consort Ninala, or Damkina, ruled over mankind in paradise, which the epic places in Dulmun. In that land there was no infirmity, no sin, and man grew not old. So he's basically immortal. No beasts of prey disturbed the flocks, and storms raged not. And they long addressed to her consort Ninala, glorifies the land of Dulmun, praising its peace and bliss. And all things were so far. He's such small writing there. And all things were so. But for some reason, which is all too briefly defined, Enki, the god of wisdom, became dissatisfied with man and decided to overwhelm him with his waters. Was it Zechariah Sitchin or something like that? Something along those lines, maybe another myth said that it's to do with the Anunnaki, all that sort of stuff, doing their genetic spicing, all that sort of stuff, making these slaves to go get their gold for their dying planet. You know, they needed it for the atmosphere, or else the planet would die, because its ozone layer was basically of gold. So they did genetic splicing and all that on these Neanderthals that were already on the planet when this other guy stole a spaceship and ended up on the planet, right? and he saw it was all plentiful and all that, so he went back and told them in the company convoys, genetically altered these beings that were on the planet, these Neanderthals, to make them slave workers to go down and get the gold in the deep crevices, etc., mines, etc., because they were chicken, they didn't like the dark. And then they sped up the process by taking one of their queens, their females, doing genetic splicing, DNA, etc., etc., to make this being, this worker, she gets pregnant, she drops a few, and then they go up, they drop a few, right, and then it speeds up that process. Okay, maybe it wasn't just one queen doing the dropping, but there was a whole lot of them, these alien females, okay, that were implanted, etc., etc., and it sped up that process to get the gold faster to save their dying planet. Okay, for some reason, which is all too briefly defined, Enki, the god of wisdom, became dissatisfied. Yeah, so these Anunnaki apparently got cheesed off with man, making too much noise, not listening to them, like, not supposed to procreate unless these gods gave permission, etc., etc., right? So they're going to leave the planet and they're going to zap the polar ice caps, so it would flood and kill all these beings. But one of their gods loved them, took pity on them and said to one of these guys who was these beings, you're a boat builder, or here's the instructions how to build a boat, which is supposed to be the Babylonian cuneiform text that what's his name, Santa Claus Hardman from the British Museum, Irving Finkel, translated into English, and then he builds this replica of, according to these plans given by the god Anu or some name like that, to this guy. Live on, survive, here's an ark, or here's a boat, save you and your family and friends, whatever, survive on, and then once it's all over, replenish the earth, multiply, increase and all that sort of stuff, right? So he did that. Whether his name was Upanchim or Atrahasis, depends on which mythos you're reading, right? Okay, so for some reason, which is all too briefly defined, Enki, the god of wisdom, became dissatisfied. This is one god of a pantheon, many of them, with man, and decided to overwhelm him with his waters. This plan he revealed to Nintod. It's another name. The other one in another mythos would probably be Anu or something like that, who, with the help of Enlil, the earth god, had created man. According to column 232, Nintod, under the title Ninhasag, assisted in the destruction of humanity. For 9 months the flood endured and man dissolved in the waters like tallow and fat. But Nintod had planned to save the king and certain pious ones. Okay, it's a completely different story to what we just relayed in the other myths. These she summoned to the river's bank, where they embarked in a boat. After the flood, Nintod is represented in conversation with the hero who had escaped. He is here called Tag Tug, and dignified by the title of a god. He becomes a gardener for whom Nintod intercedes with Enki and explains to this god how Tag Tug escaped his plan of universal destruction. This, at any rate, is the natural inference to be made from the broken passage at the end of column 3 of the obverse and the beginning of column 1 of the reverse. Enki became reconciled with the gardener, called him to his temple, and revealed to him secrets. After a break, we find Tag Tug instructed in regard to plants and trees whose fruits the gods permitted him to eat. See, that's, they couldn't do anything without the gods' permission. That's why we said they couldn't procreate. And they did it, and they were told off, hey, we didn't give you permission. But it seems that Nintod had forbidden him to eat of the cassia. Of this he took and ate, whereupon Ninhasag afflicted him with bodily weakness. Life, that is good health in the Babylonian idiom, he should no longer see. He loses the longevity of the pre-Diluvian age. Such in the Sumerian epic is the conception of the fall of man. His great loss consists in being deprived of extreme longevity and good health. The fall from primeval sinlessness is not mentioned here. But we infer, or these writers infer, from column 2 that sin had already entered into the souls of men before the flood and caused Enki to send that great catastrophe. They were breaking the rules basically, right? Procreating when they were not allowed to procreate and eating this when they're not supposed to. They didn't get permission. In a real sense, therefore, our epic, or the epic, contains both the fall from purity and the fall from longevity, or immortality. The latter is brought about by eating of the tree, and this was considered the greater disaster. We now find that man has fallen on toil and disease. Wherefore the gods sent him patrons of healing, of plants, and various arts to comfort him and aid him in his struggle for existence. Tablet number 4561 locates paradise in Dulman, and apparently Tag, the gardener, dwelled here after the flood. Also, the epical fragment of creation and the flood published by Dr Fink says that Zeu Gidu, the king who survived the deluge, or the great flood, received eternal life and lived in the mountain of Damun. So he lived forever. He was immortal. A footnote down here. The classic ideogram for Dulman is, he's got it there, in the cuneiform. And in the earliest known Sumerian passage it also has this form, Gudea, etc., etc., a Sumerian text of the Ison period. And all the differences in that cuneiform script. Okay, where are we? This land is frequently mentioned in the inscriptions of all periods as an important province in the extreme south of Babylonia. Sargon the Ancient speaks of Dulman in connection with the sea land. This is supposed to be, it's either Sargon 1 or Sargon 2. That was supposed to be the original Moses, right? He was put in a reed boat and on this river and all this sort of stuff, right? And they reckon that's where they got the Moses story from. Okay? They plagiarized it from this guy. And what happened, right? His legion. Yeah. Put on a boat, reed boat, or a little basket, and then left on this river. And somebody found him, etc., etc. Sargon the Ancient speaks of Dulman in connection with the sea land. Something called King Chronicles 2 GA. Sargon the Ancient speaks of Dulman in connection with the sea land, after which he turned his attention to Der, a city at Nunak on the Elamitic border, Magan, Arabia, Meluhaha, Egypt, Gubi, and the mountains of Dulman are mentioned together by Gudea. And the boats of Dulman, Magan, and Malhur occur together in the lexicographical list. The copper of Dulman, Magan, and Meluha is mentioned in another text. Geographical lists also connect Eridu and Dulman, a fact of special interest since Eridu on the Euphrates near the head of the Persian Gulf is the most famous centre of the cult of Enki, the water god. The text affords abundant proof that Enki was also connected with the religious traditions of Dulman, Nebo, the city god of Barsipa, and also connected with the Enki water cult, has at least 11 Sumerian titles as a god in Dulman. Whence we may suppose that Barsipa derived this deity from Dulman. Also Zapanit, consort of Marduk, son of Enki, has 7 Sumerian titles as a deity of Dulman. Thus Dulman was associated with the water god in the earliest Sumerian traditions and Babylonian theology. Still more noteworthy is the constant association of Dulman with Elam and Ansun. Zapanit of Dulman is followed by the Zapanit of Elam in the theological list of gods. Astrological texts also reflect the ancient importance of Dulman and its association with Elam, in that eclipse occurring in the 3rd month, Sivan, portend the ruin of the king of Dulman, and those occurring in the 2nd month, Ayah, portend the ruin of the king of Elam. Dalixka Delitska, many years ago identified Dulman with the island Bahrain. Okay, that's Bahrain. Okay, no, it's not Net Bahrain, is it? No, it's Betnarain. Okay. So what's that? 5. See, Delich vor lag das Paradise. Was that where was paradise in the German? Vor lag das Paradies. You can't really see that. It's very, very small. Looks like Pardies. Page 178. Although that scholar does not expressly defend this identification, yet this inference has been accepted and generally adopted. The identification with the largest of the Bahrain Islands has been suggested to scholars by passages in the inscriptions of Sargon, who, in describing his invasion of Bet Yakin, the sea coast land at the head of the Persian Gulf, and Elam says, Uperi, king of Dulman, who had made an abode in the midst of the sea towards the east, like a fish, a distance of 30 Kaskid, heard of the might of my royal power and brought tribute. If this passage be taken literally, we must infer that an island is intended, or as Deliska says, at any rate, a peninsula. But we now know that in Assyrian historical inscriptions, the Kaskid or hour's march was 5,346 meters, or 3.3218 plus English miles. If we suppose that Sargon intended to state the distance from the innermost shore of the Persian Gulf as it was in his day, that is 15 or more miles further inland than at present. We assume that Dulman lay about 100 miles from that point, say a degree and a half south of modern Basra. Of course, Dulman, if it designated a province on the Elamitic side of the Persian Gulf in the region of modern Laristan, may have included all the small islands off that coast, such as Shaika, Shuabi, Kais, and Kishim. And there's more information on that. Let us suppose that the ancient Sumerians held the same conceptions in regard to paradise. Around it flowed Bitter Stream, or the Persian Gulf, upon whose eastern bank tradition located paradise in the land of Dulman. Into this stream on the north flow the Tigris and Euphrates. In the far southeast, the Indus flows into the Arabian Sea. That's the Indus Valley, isn't that from India somewhere? Which the Sumerians probably regarded as a continuation of the world encircling Bitter Stream, and in the far southwest flows the Nile from Ethiopia into the Mediterranean Sea, in which they saw the western segment of the same Bitter Stream. Now all this agrees admirably with the biblical account. And a river issued from Eden to water the garden, and thence it divided itself and became 4 branches. There you go. In the Sumerian myths, Sumerian Epic of Paradise, whatever this book's called, Sumerian Epic of Paradise, it says the same thing. A river issued from Eden to water the garden, and thence it divided itself and became 4 branches. So where is it coming from? All your Bible scriptures, etc. Okay? It's obviously being adopted and adapted from these, right? Or these came after. That's where you have to do the research and find out the chronological timetable, the dates when this stuff was written. Does it come before the biblical accounts, or does it come after? Okay. The river issuing forth from Eden is the Persian Gulf, and the encircling Bitter Stream as Saysi first saw it. See Saysi, Higher Criticism and the Verdict of the Monuments, 95, double F. In Hebrew and Assyrian idiom, it's got it here, looks like Ras Nari, head of a stream, or head, when applied to streams means the mouth of the river, as Delich Paradise has long since emphasized. The 4 branches are rivers which flow into the stream which constantly encircles paradise. So it goes around paradise. The 4 become one and they go around paradise. So that's probably what this guy is talking about, what these other people are talking about in this particular video. Okay, that's probably what he is saying, that these guys are saying. There was 1 that became 4, but then the 4 became 1 and flowed back around the Garden of Eden.